The breaking point, when dreams turn to dust. The courthouse arrival. The morning sun felt too bright for such a dark day. Elena Rodriguez stood outside the family courthouse, her hands shaking as she gripped her worn leather purse. At 58 years old, she never imagined her life would lead to this moment. The building was huge and cold, with tall marble columns that made her feel small and powerless. Inside, the hallway echoed with footsteps and quiet conversations. Lawyers in expensive suits walked past her, their shoes clicking importantly on the polished floor. Elena wore her best dress, a simple navy blue one that she had owned for 10 years. It was the same dress she wore to her dear friend Linda's funeral 3 years ago. Her lawyer, Mr. Patterson, stood beside her looking nervous. He was a kind man in his late 60s who charged reasonable fees, but even he seemed worried today. Across the hallway, her husband Richard stood with his legal team. 3 lawyers, all wearing suits that cost more than Elena's car. Richard looked confident, almost happy, as he laughed at something one of his attorneys said. "Elena, we should prepare you," Mr. Patterson whispered. "Richard's team is very aggressive. They're going to say some hurtful things about you." Elena nodded slowly. She had been married to Richard Sterling for 30 years. She knew exactly how cruel he could be. The trial begins. When they entered courtroom 4B, Elena felt her stomach drop. The room was formal and intimidating, with dark wood panels and a high ceiling. Judge Wilson, an older man with gray hair, sat behind the bench looking bored. This was just another case to him, but to Elena, it was her entire life. Richard's lead attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Victoria Barnes, stood up first. She moved like a shark, confident and dangerous. "Your Honor," Victoria began, her voice cutting through the silent room. "Today we will show that Mrs. Elena Rodriguez Sterling has been living off my client's success for 3 decades. She has no job skills, no education beyond high school, and no ability to manage money responsibly." Each word felt like a slap. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. Furthermore, Victoria continued, pulling out a thick folder. "Mrs. Sterling has made poor financial decisions throughout the marriage. She gave away thousands of dollars to strangers, wasted money on frivolous charity projects, and showed complete disregard for her family's financial security." Richard leaned back in his chair, smirking. He caught Elena's eye and mouthed the words, "You're finished." Mr. Patterson stood up shakily. "Your Honor, Mrs. Sterling was a devoted wife and mother who—" "Objection!" Victoria's voice rang out. "Emotional arguments don't change facts. My client built a $2 million business while supporting a wife who contributed nothing. Mrs. Sterling cannot even balance a checkbook. Giving her any significant assets would be irresponsible and unfair." Judge Wilson nodded. "Continue, Ms. Barnes." Elena felt tears threatening, but held them back. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of Richard. Memory, the dream that died. Elena's mind drifted back to 1993, 30 years ago. She was 28 years old, sitting in her small apartment, surrounded by architectural drawings. She had just graduated with honors from the State University with a degree in architecture. Her designs were creative and practical. Her professors said she had real talent. That's when she met Richard at an art gallery opening. He was 30 years old, handsome, and charming. He owned a small construction company and told her she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. They talked for hours about buildings, design, and dreams. "You're incredible," Richard had said, holding her hand. "I've never met a woman as smart and talented as you." They married 6 months later. At first, everything seemed perfect. Richard encouraged her to work at a local architecture firm. She was happy, designing small projects and building her portfolio. Then, 2 years into their marriage, Elena became pregnant with their daughter Sophie. "Elena, honey," Richard had said, his voice full of concern. "I've been thinking. The architecture firm has you working such long hours. What if something happens to the baby? Maybe you should take a break, just until Sophie is born." It made sense at the time. Elena agreed. But after Sophie was born, Richard had more reasons. "Sophie needs you home. Babies need their mothers. The firm can find another architect. Sophie can't find another mother. We don't need the money. My business is doing well. Stay home and enjoy our daughter." Each reason sounded caring and thoughtful. But slowly, Elena's dreams of designing beautiful buildings faded away. Her portfolio collected dust. Her drafting table was sold at a garage sale. Years passed, and Elena became just Richard's wife and Sophie's mother. By the time Sophie started school, Richard's attitude had changed completely. "You want to go back to architecture now?" He laughed when she suggested it. "Elena, you've been out of the field for years. No one will hire you. Besides, you were never that good anyway." That was the first time Richard made her feel worthless. It would not be the last. Meeting Linda and Marcus, the memory shifted to a happier time. It was 2002, and Elena was 37 years old. Sophie was 9 and in school all day. Elena felt lonely in their big house, so she decided to hire help. That's when Linda Chen walked into her life. Linda was a small woman with tired eyes and strong hands. She was 45 years old and worked 3 jobs to support her 12-year-old son Marcus. Her husband had left them when Marcus was a baby, and Linda had been struggling alone ever since. "I work very hard," Linda said during the interview, her accent thick but her English clear. "I clean good. I cook good. I am honest." Elena hired her immediately, but more than that, she liked her. Linda was kind and funny. She brought light into Elena's lonely days. And when school holidays came, Linda brought young Marcus to work. Marcus was a quiet, serious boy with thick glasses and a book always in his hands. While Linda cleaned, Marcus would sit at the kitchen table doing homework or reading. Elena noticed how brilliant he was. He finished his schoolwork quickly and perfectly, then moved on to books far above his grade level. "Your son is very smart," Elena told Linda one afternoon. Linda's face lit up with pride, but then sadness crept in. "Yes, very smart. But we have no money for college. Marcus will work in factory like me. Is okay. We survive." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Marcus's potential being wasted. She thought about her own lost dreams, her abandoned career. She didn't want the same thing to happen to this bright young boy. The next day, Elena made a decision that would change everything. She opened a secret bank account using her maiden name. She started putting away small amounts of money, $20 or $30 here and there from the grocery budget, from birthday gifts, from any source Richard wouldn't notice. She told no one, not even Linda. Over the months and years, the account grew. Elena was careful and patient. She learned about investments by reading library books while Richard was at work. She chose safe mutual funds and watched her small savings grow. When Marcus graduated from middle school with perfect grades, Elena created a fake scholarship foundation. She made official-looking paperwork on Richard's office computer when he was traveling. She called it the Future Leaders Educational Fund. Linda, Elena called her friend into the living room one afternoon. "Look at this letter Marcus received. He won a scholarship." Linda read the letter, tears streaming down her face. $1,200 every month for college? This is miracle. Marcus, come see. Marcus, now 18 and heading to university, read the letter with wide eyes. He looked at Elena, and she saw something deep in his gaze. Did he suspect? Did he know? "Thank you, Tia Elena," he said softly, using the Spanish word for aunt. "For everything." Elena hugged him tight. "Study hard. Make your mother proud. Make yourself proud." Over the next 7 years, through Marcus's university degree and law school, Elena sent that check every single month. Richard never noticed the money missing. He was too busy with his business, his trips, his secrets. Linda got sick in 2010. Breast cancer, stage 4. Elena paid for treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. She drove Linda to appointments and held her hand through chemotherapy. And when Linda died 2 weeks before Marcus's law school graduation, Elena made her a promise. "I'll take care of him," Elena whispered at Linda's hospital bed. "I promise." Linda squeezed her hand weakly. "He knows what you did. The scholarship, he figured it out. He loves you like mother. Take care of each other." Those were Linda's last words. Richard's cruelty exposed. "Mrs. Sterling." Judge Wilson's sharp voice brought Elena back to the present. "Are you paying attention?" "Yes, Your Honor." "I apologize." Victoria Barnes was still talking, listing all of Elena's supposed failures. How she never worked a real job. How she wasted money. How she couldn't be trusted with assets. "My client's business is worth $2 million, Victoria said proudly. "He built that through intelligence, hard work, and sacrifice. Mrs. Sterling contributed nothing but domestic duties that anyone could perform. She deserves minimal support, nothing more. Richard stood up suddenly, unable to contain himself. Your Honor, may I speak? Judge Wilson nodded. Go ahead, Mr. Sterling. Richard turned to face Elena, his eyes cold. Elena, you need to understand something. You were never special. You gave up architecture because you weren't good enough to succeed. I carried you for 30 years. I paid for everything you wore, ate, and enjoyed. Without me, you are nothing. You have nothing. You are nobody. The words hung in the air like poison. Mr. Patterson put a gentle hand on Elena's shoulder, but she barely felt it. She had heard Richard say cruel things before, but never in public. Never with such complete certainty. You are nobody, Richard repeated, his voice growing louder. You always have been. This court will see that, and you'll leave here with exactly what you deserve. Nothing. Victoria tried to quiet her client, but Richard kept going. I should have divorced you years ago. You're useless, talentless, and pathetic. The only reason I stayed married this long was pity. Judge Wilson frowned. Mr. Sterling, that's enough. But Richard wasn't finished. She doesn't even know how to use a computer properly. She can't drive on the highway because she's too scared. She's weak, helpless, and completely dependent on me. Without me, she'll end up homeless within a year. The courtroom was silent. Even Richard's lawyers looked uncomfortable. Elena sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm. Then, slowly, she reached into her purse and pulled out her cell phone. Your Honor, Elena said quietly, her voice steady. May I please make one phone call? It's important. Judge Wilson looked annoyed. Mrs. Sterling, this is highly unusual. I understand, Your Honor, but there's someone who needs to know what's happening here today. Someone who should be present for this. Richard laughed loudly. Who are you going to call, Elena? Your book club? One of your charity cases? No one cares about you. Victoria leaned toward Richard, whispering urgently, but he waved her away. Let her make her call, Richard announced. Let's see who she thinks will save her. This should be entertaining. Judge Wilson checked his watch. 5 minutes, Mrs. Sterling. Make it quick. Elena stood up gracefully and walked to the back of the courtroom. Her heels clicked softly on the marble floor. She scrolled through her phone contacts until she found the name she needed. Her finger hovered over the screen for just a moment. Then she pressed call. The phone rang twice before a professional voice answered. Judge Marcus Chin's chambers. This is Elena Sterling, she said softly. I need to speak with Marcus immediately. It's urgent. There was a brief pause. Then Marcus's familiar voice came on the line, full of concern. Tia, Elena? What's wrong? Are you okay? Elena's voice remained calm, but Marcus could hear the emotion underneath. I'm at the courthouse downtown. Courtroom 4B. Family court. Richard is trying to take everything, and he's saying terrible things. I need you. The silence that followed lasted only 3 seconds, but Elena felt each one. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed completely. It was no longer the warm tone of a concerned son. It was the voice of a judge, cold and absolutely certain. I'll be right there, Tia. Don't worry. Everything is about to change. Elena hung up and walked back to her seat. Richard was still smirking, confident in his victory. His lawyers were organizing papers, preparing for their final arguments. Judge Wilson was checking his notes, ready to make his decision. None of them knew what was coming. None of them understood that sometimes the kindness you plant in secret grows into something powerful. Sometimes the people you help become the ones who save you. And sometimes the person you underestimate is the most dangerous person in the room. Elena sat down and folded her hands in her lap. For the first time that day, she smiled. In exactly 7 minutes, those heavy courthouse doors would open. And when they did, Richard Sterling's world would collapse. Part 2. The secrets unfold, the hidden investments. The atmosphere shifts. Elena returned to her seat, and the courtroom fell into an uncomfortable silence. Richard was still smiling, convinced he had already won. His lawyer Victoria whispered something to him, and he nodded confidently. Mr. Patterson looked at Elena with confusion and concern. Who did you call? He whispered. Someone who understands the truth, Elena replied softly. Judge Wilson cleared his throat. Now that Mrs. Sterling has made her mysterious phone call, shall we continue? Ms. Barnes, please proceed with your closing arguments. Victoria stood up, smoothing her expensive suit. Your Honor, the facts are clear. Mrs. Sterling has no education beyond high school, no work experience, and no financial skills. She spent her marriage as a housewife while my client built an empire. The only fair outcome is the courthouse doors burst open with a sound like thunder. Everyone turned to look. The doors were heavy oak, and they moved slowly, dramatically. A tall figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright hallway light behind him. Then he stepped forward into the courtroom, and everything changed. Marcus Chin arrives. Judge Marcus Chin walked into the courtroom with absolute confidence. He was 32 years old now, wearing the black robes of his position. His face was serious and commanding. Behind him walked his court clerk, carrying files and a laptop computer. Marcus had grown from that shy 12-year-old boy into one of the most respected judges in the state. He was known for being fair but fierce, especially in cases involving family law and protecting vulnerable people. Lawyers feared him. Criminals hated him. But families who needed justice loved him. Richard's face went completely white. His mouth dropped open in shock. "Marcus," he whispered. "Carmen's boy." Marcus's eyes found Richard across the courtroom. His expression was ice cold. "It's Judge Chen now, Mr. Sterling." Judge Wilson stood up, confused. "Judge Chen, what are you doing here? This is my courtroom." Marcus approached the bench respectfully. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption. However, I need to speak with you privately. It's urgent and concerns this case directly." The two judges stepped into a side chamber. Through the door, everyone could hear raised voices, though the words were unclear. Richard's lawyers looked nervous. Victoria kept glancing at her notes, as if searching for some way to handle this unexpected situation. 5 minutes later, both judges returned. Judge Wilson looked shocked and uncomfortable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Judge Wilson announced, "due to circumstances that have just come to my attention, I must recuse myself from this case. Judge Chun will be taking over immediately." "What?" Richard jumped to his feet. "This is insane. He can't just take over." "Mr. Sterling," Judge Wilson said firmly, "Judge Chun has legal standing to hear this case. Furthermore, certain information has been brought to my attention that requires immediate investigation. I suggest you sit down and cooperate." Marcus took his place at the bench. He looked at Elena, and for just a moment, his stern expression softened. He gave her a tiny nod, so small that only she noticed. Then he turned his attention to Richard, and his face became stone. "Let's begin again," Marcus said, his voice filling the courtroom with authority. "Ms. Barnes, I've reviewed your arguments. You claim that Mrs. Sterling contributed nothing to this marriage and deserves minimal support. Is that correct?" Victoria stood up, trying to regain her confidence. "Yes, Your Honor. The evidence is clear." "Evidence," Marcus repeated slowly. "Interesting word. Let's talk about evidence." The investigation begins. Marcus opened the file his clerk had brought. Inside were documents that made Richard's lawyers shift nervously in their seats. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus began, "your financial disclosure states that your business is worth $2 million. You claim this was built entirely through your own efforts. Correct?" Richard stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. I built Sterling Construction from nothing." "From nothing," Marcus repeated. "That's interesting, because according to public records, Sterling Construction was founded in 1995. Is that correct?" "Yes," Richard said, not seeing the trap. "And in 1996, your business nearly failed. You were 3 months behind on rent for your office space. Your bank was threatening to foreclose on your equipment loan. Do you remember that year, Mr. Sterling?" Richard's face went pale. That was a rough time. Every business has difficulties." Marcus pulled out a document. "This is a bank record from June 1996. It shows regular deposits into Sterling Construction's business account. Small deposits, ranging from $200 to $500, appearing every week for 6 months. These deposits saved your business. Where did they come from?" Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Victoria frantically flipped through her papers, searching for an answer. I had investors," Richard stammered. "Really?" Marcus's eyebrow raised. "Please name these investors." It was a long time ago. I don't remember exactly." Marcus turned to Elena. "Mrs. Sterling, do you know where those deposits came from?" Elena stood up, her voice clear and steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I worked night shifts at Mercy Hospital as a receptionist. I took that job without telling Richard because he was too proud to admit his business was failing. Every dollar I earned went to saving Sterling Construction. The courtroom gasped. Richard looked like he had been slapped. You worked at night? Mr. Patterson whispered in amazement. For how long? 6 months, Elena replied. From 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Then I came home and took care of Sophie in the house during the day. I was exhausted, but Richard's business needed help. Marcus pulled out more papers. I have the employment records right here. Elena Rodriguez Sterling, night receptionist at Mercy Hospital, June through December 1996. Total earnings deposited into Sterling Construction account, $12,400. Richard sank into his chair, speechless. So when you say your wife contributed nothing, Mr. Sterling, that appears to be incorrect. She literally saved your business when you were about to lose everything. Victoria tried to object. Your Honor, that was almost 30 years ago. It's not relevant to. Oh, but it is relevant, Marcus interrupted. Because this pattern continued throughout the marriage. Mrs. Sterling, please tell the court about your other contributions. Elena's story unfolds. Elena took a deep breath and began to speak. Years of silence were finally breaking. In 2003, Richard wanted to bid on a major commercial project, but he needed architectural drawings. He couldn't afford to hire an architect. So I stayed up for 3 weeks straight, using my old drafting skills to create the designs he needed. Richard submitted those designs under his company name and won the contract. It was worth $400,000. Marcus pulled up images on a screen. Elena's original architectural drawings appeared, beautiful and detailed, next to Sterling Construction's submitted plans. They were identical. These designs, Marcus said, launched Sterling Construction into major commercial work. Without them, the company would have remained small. Mrs. Sterling, did your husband ever credit you for this work? No, Your Honor. He told people he hired an architect. He never mentioned my name. Richard jumped up. That's not fair. I had to present it as professional work. No one would have taken us seriously if they knew my wife drew them. So you lied and stole credit for your wife's professional work, Marcus stated flatly. Continue, Mrs. Sterling. Elena's confidence grew with each word. In 2007, Sterling Construction was bidding against a larger company for a government contract. Richard needed connections, political support. I spent 6 months attending city council meetings, charity events, and fundraisers. I made friends with council members' wives. I built relationships. When the vote came, Richard won the contract because of the connections I made. That contract was worth $1.2 million. More documents appeared on the screen. Photos of Elena at events, emails between council members' wives praising Richard's lovely wife who does so much for the community, records of donations Elena made in Sterling Construction's name. Throughout this marriage, Elena continued, her voice growing stronger. I was Richard's silent partner. I designed projects. I made business connections. I entertained clients in our home, cooking elaborate dinners and making them feel important. I researched market trends and suggested which projects to bid on. But Richard told everyone he did it all alone. Marcus turned to Richard. Mr. Sterling, did your wife contribute these things? She was just being a good wife. Richard shouted. That's what wives do. Support their husbands. A good wife, Marcus repeated coldly. And what did you do in return? How did you support her? Richard had no answer. The secret accounts discovered. Marcus nodded to his clerk, who pulled up more documents on the screen. These were bank statements that made Richard's lawyers go completely silent. Mr. Sterling, Marcus said, your financial disclosure lists your total assets as $2 million. However, during our investigation this week, we discovered something interesting. You have 5 bank accounts that were not disclosed to this court or to your wife. Richard's face turned bright red. That's private. Those are business accounts. Business accounts, Marcus read from a paper, at Cayman International Bank, at Swiss Private Holdings, at Luxembourg Financial Services. These are offshore accounts, Mr. Sterling, and they contain a total of $1.4 million that you never reported. The courtroom exploded with whispers. Victoria looked like she wanted to disappear. Richard's other lawyers were frantically writing notes, probably preparing their own defense for helping hide this money. You lied to this court, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the noise. You lied to your wife. You hid money that legally belongs to both of you. That's fraud, Mr. Sterling. That's a crime. I earned that money. Richard screamed. It's mine. You earned it during your marriage, Marcus corrected, which makes it marital property. But more importantly, while you were hiding millions of dollars, you were telling your wife to ask permission before spending $5 at the grocery store. Marcus pulled up more evidence. Credit card statements, emails, text messages. These messages show that you controlled every penny your wife spent. She had to ask permission to buy groceries, to buy clothes for your daughter, to get her hair cut. Meanwhile, you were spending thousands of dollars on expensive dinners with women who were not your wife. Photos appeared on the screen. Richard at fancy restaurants with his secretary. Richard at a hotel with a woman who was clearly not Elena. Richard at a beach resort with yet another woman. You had affairs, Marcus stated. Multiple affairs. While telling your wife she was worthless and contributed nothing, you were spending marital money on other women. Richard's lawyers looked defeated. There was no defense for this. The scholarship revelation. Marcus's expression softened slightly as he turned back to Elena. Mrs. Sterling, please tell the court about your other financial activities during this marriage. Elena smiled for the first time. Your Honor, in 2002, I met a remarkable woman named Linda Chun. She was my housekeeper, but she became my closest friend. She had a brilliant son named Marcus who deserved opportunities that poverty denied him. Young people in the courtroom audience sat up straighter, realizing they were hearing the judge's own story. I couldn't let his potential be wasted, Elena continued. So I started saving money. Small amounts, carefully hidden. $20 from grocery money here, $30 from birthday gifts there. Over 2 years, I saved $15,000. $15,000, Marcus repeated, his voice full of emotion he tried to hide. From grocery money and birthday gifts. While asking permission to buy shampoo. Yes, Your Honor. When Marcus graduated high school, I created a scholarship fund. I made it look official so Linda and Marcus would accept it. I sent $1,200 every month for 4 years of college, then $1,500 every month for 3 years of law school. Total investment, $75,600. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I paid for Judge Marcus Chen's education, Elena said proudly. Every penny of it. Because I believed in him when no one else could afford to. Marcus looked down at his papers, blinking rapidly. When he looked up, his eyes were shining. Mrs. Sterling invested $75,000 in my future, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Money she saved through sacrifice and careful planning. Meanwhile, Mr. Sterling was hiding $1.4 million and claiming his wife had no financial skills. He turned to Richard, and his expression hardened again. You called her nobody, Mr. Sterling. You said she contributed nothing. But this woman worked night shifts to save your failing business. She designed the projects that made you rich. She built the connections that won you contracts. She invested in a child's future when no one else would. And you? You lied, cheated, stole credit, and hid money while calling her worthless. Richard had no answer. His expensive lawyers sat silent. Victoria stared at her notes, unable to meet anyone's eyes. This case is continued for 1 week, Marcus announced. Mr. Sterling, you will provide complete financial disclosure of all accounts, including offshore holdings, within 3 days. You will also provide documentation of all marital funds spent on personal entertainment over the past 10 years. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges and possible criminal prosecution for fraud. He banged his gavel. Furthermore, Mr. Sterling, you are ordered to have no contact with Mrs. Sterling outside of court proceedings. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do you understand? Yes, Richard whispered, his earlier confidence completely destroyed. Court is adjourned. We reconvene in 1 week. After the hearing, as people filed out of the courtroom, Marcus stepped down from the bench and approached Elena. For a moment, the stern judge disappeared, and he was just Marcus again, the boy who used to read at her kitchen table. Tio Elena, he said softly. Elena hugged him tightly. Thank you for coming. Thank you for everything you did for me. For my mother. For believing in me when no one else did. Tears ran down his face. Mom told me the truth before she died. About the scholarship, about the medical bills you paid, about everything. I've been waiting for the chance to repay you. You don't owe me anything, Elena said. Yes, I do. I owe you everything. And I'm going to make sure you get everything you deserve. Richard stood across the courtroom with his lawyers, watching Elena and Marcus embrace. For the first time, he understood what he had lost. Not just money or property, but something far more valuable. He had lost respect. He had lost dignity. And most importantly, he had lost the one person who had truly loved him, who had sacrificed everything for him, who had been his real partner all along. Now that person stood with someone else, someone she had invested in, someone who would protect her the way Richard should have. Richard had called her nobody, but as he watched Elena smile and laugh with Judge Marcus Chun, surrounded by supporters and well-wishers, he realized the truth. She had never been nobody. He just hadn't been paying attention. And now, it was too late. Part 3, Justice and New Beginnings, The Reckoning. The week of investigation. The 7 days between hearings felt like a lifetime. Elena stayed with her daughter Sophie, who had taken time off from art school to support her mother. Sophie was 19 now, with her mother's kind eyes and her own fierce spirit. "Mom," Sophie said one evening as they sat together drinking tea, "why didn't you tell me how bad things were with Dad?" Elena touched her daughter's face gently. "I didn't want you to choose sides. You deserve to love both your parents. But he treated you terribly. All those years." "Yes," Elena agreed. "But I chose to stay. That was my decision. And honestly, Sophie, if I had left earlier, I wouldn't have been there to help Marcus. I wouldn't have saved that money." Sometimes our hardest experiences lead us exactly where we need to be. Meanwhile, Marcus's team was working day and night. Forensic accountants dug through every financial record Richard had ever touched. Private investigators interviewed Richard's business partners, employees, and associates. What they discovered was worse than anyone imagined. Richard had not only hidden money from Elena, he had been running Sterling Construction through deceptive practices for years. He underpaid workers and pocketed the difference. He used cheap materials on projects but charged clients for expensive ones. He falsified tax documents and avoided paying hundreds of thousands in taxes. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. The final hearing arrives. 1 week later, courtroom 4B was packed. News of the case had spread throughout the legal community. People wanted to see Judge Marcus Chun, known for his fierce protection of vulnerable families, take on a wealthy businessman who had abused his wife for decades. Elena arrived early, wearing a simple but elegant gray suit. Sophie sat beside her, holding her hand. On Elena's other side sat Mr. Patterson, who looked far more confident than he had the previous week. Across the aisle, Richard sat alone. His team of expensive lawyers had been reduced to just one, Victoria Barnes, who looked exhausted and defeated. The other attorneys had quietly withdrawn from the case when they realized Richard had lied to them too. Richard himself looked terrible. His expensive suit couldn't hide the weight he had lost. His face was pale and drawn. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. For the first time in 30 years, Richard Sterling looked weak. Marcus entered the courtroom in his judge's robes, his expression serious and professional. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Everyone stood as Marcus took his place at the bench. "Please be seated," Marcus said. "We're here to conclude the divorce proceedings of Sterling versus Sterling. Mr. Sterling, have you provided the complete financial disclosure I ordered?" Victoria stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. All documents have been submitted." "Good. I've reviewed everything thoroughly. I've also received reports from forensic accountants and investigators. What they found is extremely troubling." Marcus pulled up documents on the courtroom screen. Numbers and charts appeared, showing Richard's hidden wealth in devastating detail. The truth laid bare. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus began, "your original financial disclosure stated your assets totaled $2 million. However, the complete picture is very different." The screen showed a comprehensive breakdown. Sterling Construction business value, $2 million. Offshore account, Cayman Islands, $580,000. Offshore account, Switzerland, $490,000. Offshore account, Luxembourg, $330,000. Real estate purchased in secretary's name, $425,000. Investment accounts hidden from spouse, $275,000. Cash and other assets, $150,000. Your actual assets total $4,250,000, Marcus announced. "You hid more than half your wealth from your wife and from this court." The courtroom buzzed with shocked whispers. Elena stared at the numbers in disbelief. Over $4 million. She had been asking permission to buy groceries while Richard was a multimillionaire. Furthermore, Marcus continued, our investigation revealed serious criminal activity within Sterling Construction. Richard's face went white as Marcus detailed the findings. You systematically underpaid workers, violating labor laws. You used substandard materials while billing for premium supplies, defrauding your clients. You falsified tax returns for 8 consecutive years, evading approximately $340,000 in federal and state taxes. And you used marital funds to purchase property for your mistress while claiming poverty to your wife. Victoria tried to object. Your Honor, these allegations should be addressed in criminal court, not. They will be, Marcus interrupted coldly. I've already forwarded all evidence to the district attorney's office. But these crimes are relevant to this divorce because they demonstrate a pattern of deception, fraud, and financial abuse toward Mrs. Sterling. Richard finally stood up, his voice desperate. Your Honor, please. I made mistakes, but I was just trying to protect my assets. I built that company. I deserve. You deserve? Marcus's voice cut like a knife. Let's talk about what you deserve, Mr. Sterling. Elena's contributions revealed in full. Marcus turned to a new presentation, this one focused entirely on Elena's contributions. Mrs. Sterling, Marcus said gently, please approach the stand. Elena walked forward and was sworn in. She sat in the witness chair, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Mrs. Sterling, you graduated with a degree in architecture in 1993. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And you worked as an architect for 2 years before your marriage? Yes, Your Honor. I worked at Henderson and Associates Architects. I was their junior designer. Marcus displayed Elena's old portfolio on the screen. Beautiful building designs, detailed blueprints, creative and functional spaces. Even decades later, her talent was obvious. You gave up this career when you became pregnant with your daughter? My husband convinced me it was best for the family, Elena said quietly. But you didn't stop using your skills, did you? No, Your Honor. Richard's business needed help, so I helped. Marcus showed project after project where Elena's architectural expertise had been crucial. Not just the 2003 designs, but dozens of others. She had designed renovations, additions, and complete buildings. Every single design submitted under Sterling Construction's name had Elena's fingerprints on it. Expert analysis of these designs, Marcus explained, confirms they all share the same distinctive style and technical approach. They were all created by the same architect, Elena Sterling. He turned to Richard. Mr. Sterling, how many projects did your company complete that used your wife's designs? Richard stared at his hands. Answer the question, Marcus ordered. Most of them, Richard whispered. I'm sorry, could you speak up? Most of them, Richard shouted. Fine. She designed most of the buildings. But I ran the business. I got the clients. I managed everything. You managed everything? Marcus pulled up more evidence. Mrs. Sterling, please tell the court about your other responsibilities. Elena took a breath and began listing everything she had done for 30 years. I managed all client relationships with their wives and families. I researched every project before Richard bid on it, studying zoning laws, environmental regulations, and market conditions. I negotiated with suppliers to get better prices on materials. I reviewed all contracts before Richard signed them, catching legal issues multiple times that would have cost him dearly. I maintained relationships with city officials, building inspectors, and community leaders. I hosted dinners, attended fundraisers, and built the social network that brought in most of Richard's biggest clients. With each point, Marcus displayed supporting evidence. Emails, photos, testimonials from people who confirmed Elena's crucial role. Mrs. Sterling, Marcus asked, did your husband ever acknowledge these contributions publicly? No, Your Honor. He told people I was just a housewife. He said I spent my days shopping and having lunch with friends. But that wasn't true. No, Your Honor. I worked for Sterling Construction every single day. I just wasn't paid, credited, or recognized. Marcus turned back to Richard. So when you claim you built this company alone, that's completely false. Your wife was your silent partner, your architect, your business consultant, and your social connector. Without her, Sterling Construction would not exist. Richard had no answer. The verdict. Marcus gathered his papers and looked out at the crowded courtroom. His voice was clear and firm. I've been a judge for 8 years. I've heard hundreds of divorce cases, but I have never seen financial abuse and manipulation this extreme. Mr. Sterling systematically undermined his wife's confidence, stole credit for her professional work, controlled every penny she spent while hiding millions, and then called her worthless and incompetent. He paused, letting the words sink in.